evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
89.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always with my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, Mark.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today. I do have to apologize because I'm using my phone. I'm pulling a Jeff, as we like to call here in the studio, like we're all together in a studio. But if the audio quality tonight, at least on my end, isn't up to snuff, that I'm apologizing up front. But at the beginning of this origin of getting into your ears with these podcasts, the first thing we did was introduce the cast and crew that make the magic happen at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. And this year, we were blessed with a new addition that he's been a part of the family for years. He's been coming to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater for years, but he stepped into the limelight as, I guess, assistant projectionist, although he pulls just as much weight as anybody else in that booth. So without further ado, our friend, our brother, Michael Drumbore. I'd clap right now. This is when the audience claps. Welcome, my bro.
Good evening, everybody.
The undeniable voice that you hear on the mic, greeting you before a show, letting you out to the wolves after a show, or at least the wild.
As far as I know, there have been no confirmed wolves on the lot.
Yeah,
couple
we hear
coyotes.
the howls, but yes, no instance. But yeah, let's kind of jump into things. There's so much that it's so hard with where we start. Like, we have gone through, every season feels sometimes more than others. Like, we've been to like a really intense summer camp, or like I liken it always to the theater, you know, like putting on a show at the theater where we all come together and have these incredible, endless experiences together, and then we kind of break off and are all away from each other. So it's tough where to start, but why don't you tell us about your origin with the Mahoning Drive-In Theater? When was it first brought onto your radar?
Oh, my first memory of the Mahoning is also my very first conscious movie-going experience in a theater.
Oh, amazing. This is going to be great.
It was 1995 when Pocahontas was first run. I was about 4 years old, and my parents took me to see Pocahontas at the Mahoning.
Unbelievable.
What I always ask is, do you remember the co-feature? Did you stay for the co-feature? And geographically on the lot, where did you park?
Co-feature, I don't remember. We probably only stayed for the first feature. And we would park front row over towards where Virgil's camper is, over there. That would kind of be our family spot, which is then the spot, once I started coming back for the retro screenings, the same spot I wanted.
Perfect.
Front row, just off to the side.
Yep, that's the move. I'll tell you, it's a great spot to watch movies. I can vouch for that. And were you a regular going to the Mahoning, or were your parents regulars going to the Mahoning at that point?
My parents did go on and off. You know, if they liked whatever movie was showing, they'd go there, or they'd go to the indoor theater just down the street. But all through my childhood, if we wanted to go see a movie during the summer, we'd go to the drive-in.
Did you frequent any of the other local drive-ins, or were you like Mahoning loyalists?
We went to Mahoning because it was closer. From my parents' house, it was only 10 minutes, 15 minutes, give or take. And they'd always have, at the time, there would be family carload nights. So it made sense to bring me and my sister, or my aunt always has stories about taking her two daughters and my sister to the Mahoning. And they'd be passed out by the time the first feature was over. She'd stay watch the second feature. She only lived right up the hill from the Mahoning after you cross 443. So she'd just cover him with a blanket, drive home, park in the garage, leave him, let him sleep in the garage.
I
With the car
love
off.
that.
The car was off, right?
Of course,
Okay,
of course, the
perfect.
car was off. I do still have a sister and 2 cousins.
Perfect.
See, that's the perfect memory. Like, and that's the case a lot of the times is that, the parents will take their kids and they would fall asleep and then they would get their, personal escape and personal time watching feature number 2, and I don't know, like, the origin as far as when they really started shifting into double features at a drive-in, if that was kind of the move right out the gate, or if that was something that was adopted for that reason.
Looking at our old ads, this ongoing project that I'm doing, going through our old listings from literally day one up to now, which I post on Patreon, there were a lot of single features. Like in the beginning, it was mostly single features. And then, or if there was a weeknight show, weeknight was usually going to be a single feature and the weekends might be a double. So it wasn't strictly doubles like it became, for all of our lives.
That's weird. It's kind of like what we now have shifted back to with the Tuesday single shows and weekday single features, and really going for it hard on the weekends. I mean, I'm sure it was a conscious choice at a certain point to give more bang for the buck or something like that. But I know certainly in our heyday of going to the drive-in, which same time, it was really late 80s, early 90s for me. And it sounds like for you, Mike, you got that experience around the same time. That's how they were programmed. A children's movie up front, hardcore or hardcore.
Pardon?
The more not so family fare is the second feature.
That was Becky's that had the hardcore.
I set it up on a tee for you.
It was, at the time, it was the Route 145 drive-in. And I think it was through the 80s, in order to make more money, they showed adult films.
That was their draw. And I was actually just talking to Bill on the lot, whose family used to run the Mahoning drive-in. And he said that they were open all year round. We were in the discussion of as far as running the drive. He's like, I wish you guys were still open and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Becky's used to run year round when they were showing nudie movies. I was like, well, nobody's getting out of the car when they're
And their screen does not in any way face the road, unlike ours.
The original screen doesn't.
Oh, does the new one face the road?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can see it at Lamp.
If you're going south on 145, you can see the screen, the new second screen. But the old original screen, that's
safe.
Safe.
Yeah.
Yes, very safe.
Do you have memories going to Becky's or any of the other area drive-ins?
Not till high school.
So childhood, strictly Mahoning. I mean, it makes sense. 10 minutes away, you can literally ride your bike there.
Yeah, and I had. Not to go see a movie, but I had ridden my bike out there just to see if I could.
Do you remember anything like unusual or special, memorable that stands out from your, let's call what we do now the modern era, your pre-modern era movie going at the Mahoning?
It was just always impressive seeing a movie that big, because growing up in Lehigh, all we had was the multiplex there next to the grocery store and the Allentown theaters. If it was something that we wanted to have a special night out, we'd go to see a movie at an indoor in Allentown and dinner before. So really, it wasn't until later that I got to see, like, that was the biggest screen there was, because there was no IMAX theaters around here or anything. So just getting to see a scope movie on that screen young is mind-boggling for living in the area we do.
And for your memory, you have to have been the person who's been to the Mahoning the longest, or been coming the longest of anybody who works there now. Has the structure, like, do you remember when it had the corral system? Were you going then at that point?
No, I don't. More often than not, we would have dinner before we would go to the theater. So we would never really go into the snack bar or anything.
At a certain point, I know that we had a kind of 2 entrance system in the snack bar. And I think that probably was gone by the 90s, but you could go in on either side. There were food warmers on either side, and then you'd meet in the middle and then kind of work your way out to where the condiment table is now and pay there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you had two register folks there taking your order, taking your money, and I'm sure it was super efficient, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
I wish I had a picture of what it looked like when we had that set up. That's what I'm so curious about too, is we have made our name on being an original drive-in that hasn't changed very much. And that's certainly the case with your memory. Did you, now being in the position that you were in, ever get to go into the projection booth or take a peek into the projection booth?
No, I have no memory of that. Considering we'd usually just stay at the car once we got there. And even then at the time, the projection booth always would have been closed. At that time, the projection booth was a closed door policy as opposed to our open and interactive layout we have now, where anybody can come and see how it works and what goes on in there.
Super unique on how we do it. That's why the idea of getting a peek as a kid or at a certain age, it was like unbelievable, you know? I know, Mark, you've told the story of you went on a class trip, right? Got to see behind the curtain.
Yeah, I won't waste everybody's time right now.
Not at the Mahoning, of course.
But yeah, I was taken in a Cub Scout troop up to the projection booth of the local 3-screen strip mall theater, and it was like a formative experience for me. And I love that Mike is doing that for kids now, you know, and we have video footage and photos of him literally doing that, giving little kids the story of how the projector works, and just their eyes are wide, and it's something that they're not going to see anywhere else.
Well, it's a good segue into what it means to be a projectionist at the Mahoning. Because we have that open door policy, the experience is much different. And I said it on the social media post, and we'll say it till the day I die. You guys are so perfect for what it takes to be truly an MC or a host at a lot of times when people come into the booth. What's been your experience there? Was that an easy kind of transition?
At times it was a little awkward because I was still learning, and I have people coming and asking me questions, you know, explaining how it works. I've always known the meat and potatoes of how projection works, more or less, but being in the position as essentially an ambassador into the booth and explaining, here's how it actually works, here's the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, and how we try to do it properly to display some of these prints, or some of them are one of a kind, to do it in the most archival standards as opposed to how it may have been done when everything was in the first run era for film.
Yeah.
But as the season went on and I got better at my job of projection, I got a lot more comfortable talking with people, explaining, and just the fascination in kids' eyes when they see the machines working and what actually goes into putting a movie on the screen, as opposed to what they're familiar with of just hit a play button and off you go.
Yeah, and I've said it, like, that's the stuff that will last forever. You know, it's not only making memories, but it's informing potentially somebody's love and passion for movies and, you know, movie making, and could lead them down a path. Do you think that your early experiences and exposure to film led you down the path that you are now on, just as far as being such a passionate lover of movies and passionate lover?
Oh. Well, as far as passionate lover, I'll leave that for my wife to comment on. But absolutely, just growing up watching movies with my dad was absolutely what led me to where I'm at, with more movies than I can shake a stick at.
Was he open to, I know that my mother certainly was open to exposing you, well, maybe that's not the right word, to allowing you to see things that were maybe out of your age range?
Oh, absolutely. I remember The first R-rated movie I watched was The Terminator.
Yes.
And
T1?
T1.
Yes.
And the only censoring they did was Linda Hamilton's sex scene in the movie. I had to close my eyes and look away.
That was always the thing, it's like, the sex is one thing, the smashing of somebody's head by a hammer, that's fine.
Oh, the violence was all fine.
Violence fine.
I got a little talk from my mom. Just remember, it's all make-believe. It's all pretend.
That's what I'm seeing now as a parent is movies more than anything are the perfect conversation starter, especially when you are raising a child,
Mm-hmm. Because my dad would always put on one of the movie channels. There was a movie on TV. Pop this on. Oh, I've never seen this before. Let's watch this.
So you were always open to older films too, were you?
Pretty much, because I watched what my dad watched, which was generally older films from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So in relation to where I was in life and really coming of age and my adolescence in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So when did you become a regular? I mean, were you a steady Mahoning customer even after the switch to retro, or did you drift away and retro brought you back? I mean, what hooked you back into coming? Because you guys were, I mean, the way we drew you into the fold, which is how we often sneakily do it, is we find somebody who's there all the time and loves the place, and we're like, hey, you want to work here?
Yeah, pretty much. Through high school, I kind of really lost interest in first run film. Anything that was really showing in the major multiplexes around me, none of that interested me. I was more interested in seeking out older films, more obscure films, weirdo horror films, all the shit like that. So I really drifted off from the Mahoning and Becky's. That would kind of be more of a, oh, my girlfriend and I want to go out to the drive-in for the night thing we do. She wanted to see the new Twilight movie. Okay, we'll go see it at the drive-in. But then when the Mahoning went retro, I'm like, holy shit, they're showing movies I want to see. I gotta go.
You were very much like Mark, I feel like, where you were a traveler to go and see movies, not just necessarily on film, but retro classic screenings.
Yeah, if I had to drive to go see a movie I wanted to see, I was never opposed to it. I likened it to, well, I drive to go see a band I really want to see. Well,
that's the motto.
If it's a movie that doesn't screen often and you got to drive to see it, well, why the hell not?
Yeah, it's like seeing your favorite band. You wouldn't think twice about that.
Especially if that movie's not readily available, but it's actually being screened. If you want to see it, you got to go.
Were you part of that 35 millimeter Alamo, New York scene before the Mahoning went retro?
Nope. I met all of them at the Mahoning and ended up.
That's crazy to me. I think I've said this to you because for some reason I just assumed that you guys were all a clique and collective that went to the Alamo shows and Riverside and things like that and just migrated over to us eventually. But the fact that it brought everybody together is cooler.
Yeah, the first night that Kate and I came out as patrons in the retro era, the first person we met and became friends with was Carl and Daryl.
Unbelievable. Which, as the listeners know, Carl and Daryl are not just volunteers on the lot, they are truly family members at this point with helping us do what we do, That's just amazing. And that's one thing that can always be said about the Mahoning. It is such a gift in that it has brought our community together and brought our friendships together, I can't imagine my life without some of the people that we met at the Mahoning, And the fact that it happened so casually is even better.
Yeah, you're just sitting there parked, you're getting ready for the movie, and then all of a sudden you hear the person next to you talking about something. And it's like, oh, I know what that is. And you chime in. And
did we just become best friends?
And just, you get a good conversation going. And next thing you know,
they're sleeping on your couch.
Yeah. Next thing you know, they're sleeping on your couch and you're driving 2 hours for their 50th birthday party.
Happy birthday, Carl. Do you remember what that first retro screening was that you guys attended?
It was the George Romero night.
Yes, early on. That was 2015. Oh, well, when did he pass away? That we did it as a tribute, I think, the weekend after he passed away.
No, it was before he passed away.
Really?
Yeah, because I was at an Exhumed screening and we were all having a break in between movies, and the news broke that George Romero passed away.
Wow.
So it was 2015.
Maybe I'm getting that confused with another screening, which happens often.
Unfortunately.
But what was that lineup, if you recall? I think I remember, but let's pull your memory.
It was Night of the Living Dead and The Crazies. And then night 2 was Day of the Dead and Night Riders.
Booyah. There it is. Talk about a great intro to what the Mahoning does. Now, was that your first intro to what Exhumed does?
Yes, it was actually.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, that's where I found out about them and then started going to their screenings down in Philly, and here I am now.
That's just incredible because you are somebody who now lives and breathes film and, actual film, 35 millimeter film and beyond. And to think that that love was born on the lot, your childhood lot, and guided your life and passion, I'm telling you, that's the magic of the Mahoning. Now, you became pretty friendly with us almost instantly.
Oh, yeah. I was just so happy to see that my childhood drive-in was, A, showing movies that I actually wanted to go see now, and starting to look like it was going to flourish again. I remember being a young kid and coming there and seeing a pretty packed lot, but then on the same token, in high school, go out for one of the new big blockbusters and there's like nobody there. Most people, if they wanted to go to the drive-in, they're like, oh, let's go to Becky's. It's a little bit nicer, yada, yada, yada. And now to see the place I grew up and first remember going to see a movie actually turning a corner, because I remember right around the time, a few years before the shift to retro, there was a competition going around.
Yes. Hyundai's I'm trying to remember, Hyundai's Save the Drive-In project.
Yeah.
I think Hyundai.
That was it. To nominate a drive-ins, and they would donate digital projection for drive-ins, because those systems are just...
5 winners were chosen, and they, from what I understand, the previous managers of the Mahoning went really hard after this promotion.
Oh, they did. I remember, even though I didn't care for first run cinema, I went very hard voting, nominating for the Mahoning at the time, because that's where I grew up going to see movies. I don't want to see that have to go away because Hollywood doesn't want to distribute on film anymore.
Sure. Even at that time when seemingly the locals had moved on from the experience and really made the choice on which drive-in they were going to go to on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And in your childhood, it's not like, I'd imagine it's even lesser so of a populated area. That's the one thing that really works for us now, is that we're quote unquote in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine even back then, it's like, there was probably even less of a pool of people to entertain on any given night.
Yeah, because otherwise, if anybody wanted to go to a drive-in from, say, points north, we were closer. So you think Tamaqua, Hazleton, Jim Thorpe, Nesquehoning, on up the line that way.
Those are Mahoning peeps.
If they wanted to see a first-run film and go to the drive-in to do it, they'd have to come down to us. Most of the drive-ins up there had already closed. So we would still be able to get those people in the first run days. But as more and more people just wanted to sit at home and watch the movie, or just go to the indoor theater. There was more options.
Right. I mean, it's crazy because that's certainly my memory coming into things, and that was 2014. So to think that it had gone through those struggle years that long, and it's worth mentioning the Mahoning didn't win that competition, of course, but that also rumbled out the management. From what I understand, is that really caused the step back, I think, from the management to be like, can we make a go of this? And right around that time is when Jeff took over.
Mm-hmm.
All part of the history, all a storied past to get us to where we are now. But as you guys know, when Mike saw films at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, it was on 35 millimeter. And now you are the guy running that 35 millimeter. Why don't you talk about that origin story, how you truly became part of the family on an official level, and how easily or how difficult that was for you to take on?
So prior to the beginning of this season, I had never handled 35 before. I had only ever run 8 millimeter and Super 8 at home. Looked at and did some 16 with some friends, but that's night and day compared to running actual motion picture 35. So at the end of last season, forget how Rob and I got talking, because I had a lingering interest. I wanted to learn how to do it, because it was, I knew it is a dying art. Fewer and fewer people are learning how to do it, as there's fewer and fewer places that do screen 35, especially 35 millimeter changeover. And so Rob was doing so much by himself. He welcomed the idea of somebody wanting to learn. So we got talking a lot. I spent a couple nights just kind of watching him work, seeing how he did everything. And then at the beginning of this season, Jess reached out to me and said, "Hey, we know you started learning how to run film, learning a little bit last year. Do you want to become another projectionist?" I'm like, hell yes, sign me up.
And what I love is that really not very far into this season, you were running shows completely by yourself, i.e., you were the only projectionist on the lot.
Yeah. It was very quick.
Crash course.
Yeah. My first night on the job, so to speak, was the Patreon pre-show the Thursday before we opened officially for the public, where Jeff took the time, taught me how to thread the projectors, turn everything on, and start learning the art of projection. And then, after running a few shows with Jeff always there checking my work, making sure I was doing everything right, I think it was the Mary Poppins Chitty Chitty Bang Bang show I was running the Friday night.
That was weekend 3, bro. That was the third freaking weekend.
That was. Jeff's there, and he's like, "I'm going out to dinner with some friends. I should be back by the time the show starts, but if I'm not, I think you've got it." And
incredible.
Away I went. It's been smooth sailing ever since.
Like Mary Poppins herself, you got swept up by the umbrella, and off away we went.
Away we went. I didn't burn the place down my first night running film by myself.
That's the biggest fear, right? Is that just not that something's going to go wrong? It's just like you're standing there and all of a sudden.
Well, no, that night, the trailer reel that we had was one that came from one of the collections Jeff had picked up. It had a 1947 Bambi re-release trailer in it, printed on nitrate film stock.
Oh my gosh, that's
my first night. Jeff's like, "Okay, I'm going out to dinner," and I'm like, not only am I having to start everything up myself, but there's a nitrate trailer in there. I'm like, what do I do if something goes sideways? It's like, close the dowser, then shut the motor off. I'm like, all right, just stand by the projector the whole time, keep your hand on the dowser. I'm like, all right, if you trust me, I guess I can do it. And We didn't have a fire, nothing happened, and here we are.
That breeds greatness, though. Jeff is fantastic in that way, and that he will set the stage for you. But once he feels you are in a good position, he will let you off the chain, as he likes to say. And honestly, Mike, like it feels like you were meant to be in a projection booth. Like the fact that it's at the Mahoning at our home is such a blessing and such a gift. Any choice memories from your literally probably hundreds of films that you ran this season?
It was 94 films.
94. I love that. Of the 200 films that we ran officially, 94 of them were under your
a few of them.
thumb.
A few of those films were ones that I ran at the Colonial during the 24-hour horror-thon. But
right,
yeah, over 90 of the 35 films that we ran, I was either assisting or the only projectionist on the lot running.
Bravo. Unbelievable. Talk about, a learning experience. You jump into it. What do they say? A certain number of hours and you really get the perfection down?
I'm still learning a lot. I've been talking with some other projectionists who are very akin on archival projection for following the best practices of how to treat and handle the film, because hardly anybody's striking new prints, and some of the movies we show, nobody's ever going to pay the money for a new print to be struck. So we could be looking at the only surviving and projectable print. So I'm constantly trying to learn more to handle the film better, so that way it incurs no damage under my projection and can look just as good in the future for the next audience to see it.
And that's where you guys really thrive as well is, we'll get into what it takes to get a film up on screen, but you guys have a true love and passion for it, that you have the motto that any film that comes in, you're going to send it back, if not the way it came, in better condition sometimes, with the repair of film, with the presentation, getting it back in time, all that stuff. Like that is just like representing us talking to kids and families when people come into the booth. That is incredibly important with the longevity of our business is if we keep the people that we work with happy, the studios, the other theaters, this and that, that goes a long way to the power of us sticking around and people loving what we do. So why don't you speak a little bit about the process from when a film comes in to when it hits the screen?
So usually once the film either arrives through FedEx, or if it's one of Harry's prints out of his archive or a print in my archive, once that film is in our possession and to be screened, the first step is inspection. So I have a full inspection desk at home with manual rewinds. So first step is to sit and inspect the film head to tail. Check for any bad splices, any damage, anything like that, and repair it. And ideally, you want to repair it in a non-destructive way. So if it's a bad splice, but you can retape it in order to avoid cutting a frame out, that is what you do. You avoid anything that will remove any of that print from it. Sometimes it is unavoidable, where the studio print comes and there's just such bad damage to it, it will not run in its present state. But generally speaking, you do not remove anything unless it's just old splicing tape.
And the inspection process is truly a safety protocol to make sure that when you are running the film through your projectors, or in this case, the Mahoning projectors, that you're not going to get a hang up and you're not going to get hung up in any way.
Yeah, any kind of damage. If it's damage that jams up in the projector, you can damage not only the film, but the projector itself. Because even if the film stops running, that projector's not going to stop. So you can bind up your intermittent gear, or any number of things can become damaged in the projector, which then affects your ability to put on future shows until that gets repaired.
Right. It's a situation where I saw it in the earlier years when we were running retro. It's one of those jobs that Jeff would farm out. He would say, "Hey, I'm running the film tonight, but if you want to inspect, do you find the process tedious? Do you get into it? Is it something that's up your alley?"
It's almost meditative at times because I can just sit and focus just on the film, just letting it slide through tips of my fingers, feeling it as it goes through. It's a very tactile process. Finding that damage, looking at it, is this something that needs to be repaired, removed, or is this just totally fine? Generally, it's something that needs to be repaired or just needs to be looked at. It's like, okay, that splice is good. That's a good splice. That'll pass through no problem. Occasionally, it does get a little tedious, mostly with stuff that's come from some of the collections that the drive-in accumulated. There's some of those trailer reels have had a number of old cement splices, and every one of those is starting to come apart. So they need to be either removed entirely or at least reinforced with splicing tape so they'll pass through the projector.
And by cement, you mean rubber cement?
It's actually a specific kind of film cement. When it's done properly, it essentially welds two pieces of acetate film together.
Oh, wow. Well, talk about on a film lover level. You're literally getting your hands on the film and getting to run the film through your fingers. And when you say meditative, there's many times when I'll come into the booth and you guys are inspecting film, whether it's yourself or Robert, and there's a rhythm to the motion that you guys are doing. And there's also kind of a rhythm to the machinery making some noise, but you really can get into a groove. And I was going to say, setting up that question, that I find, that you guys really do enjoy it at times, getting to be the one who is on the front line to not just run that safety protocol, but, again, get your hands on truly one of a kind prints and sometimes famous collector's prints.
Yeah, this year at the Tarantino show, 3 of the films we ran were Tarantino's personal prints. Jackie Brown, Death Proof, and Reservoir Dogs. Those were his personal copies for himself. So when Tarantino is at home and wants to watch the movie, that's the copy he's going to put on the projector.
Talk about a position to be in, talk about an extra pressure. Like running any film stuff, but in that case, it's like, all right, we want to make sure this one gets back in the right.
If you can think back over this last year, what was the most sweat-inducing or nerve-wracking print that you had to run for whatever reason?
Dolomite.
No hesitation. What's the story there?
That was the first Tuesday after the great COVID wipeout, for one.
Oh my gosh, that's right. God, that seems like an eternity ago.
It wiped out. Jeff was out. Rob and I already agreed I was running that Tuesday. It wasn't one of Harry's prints, but he had gotten it from another collector. And I had to inspect the print day of show.
That's right. Sometimes Harry gets there late, like he'll get there 6:30, 7 o'clock for a 8:30 showtime or earlier sometimes.
It wasn't his timing. It was the print did not get to him in enough time for him to get it to us to do it beforehand. So that print needed quite a bit of work to get into a runnable state due to some bad splices, perf damage, just stuff that I did not trust to go through the projector and leave the print undamaged. So I worked from the moment I arrived at the theater until probably 15 minutes before showtime to get the print ready. And that was still an early show, so I was still pretty green with projection at the time. So it was
Quite an
That was a
adventure.
very nerve-wracking night.
It poured that night. It poured that night too, from what I remember, like terribly poured.
It did. It was pouring rain, and it was just an ugly night, and everybody was either sick or cleaning to disinfect the entire building, except me there at the film desk.
You were truly running the show that night. Man, yeah, we were all out. Myself, Jeff, what was it, Beth too?
Me,
Beth.
It felt like everybody was out.
Oh, I was also DJing too, because the DJ got COVID too.
Unbelievable. You never know what you're going to get at the Mahoning.
So I just threw on some blaxploitation soundtrack playlist just to put some music on the air while I worked.
I was quarantining in the trailer and grooving along. That's the beautiful thing, is that, you know, our team is so strong and so passionate about putting on the show that really nothing will stop them, even seemingly endless hurdles.
The show must go on.
That's right. I can recall certainly many instances with equipment either failing or film continually breaking. That's just kind of the built-in experience at the Mahoning. And like we tell people, that's what you get running 35 millimeter. And more cases than not, we have flawless screenings. But, you know, whenever something goes wrong, it certainly stands out. Anything else pop out?
Now that you say it about the equipment, it was the third feature of the AGFA Triple Ripper. The rectifier for projector 1 failed.
Yes, that's right.
And I had went to change over from reel 1 to reel 2 of Penitentiary 3, and nothing.
Not
Got audio, but no picture. And I ended up, because the show must go on, I ended up running the entirety of that third feature off of one projector. So I would have to, after the reel ended, close the dowser, let the tail run out before I could kill the motor, take that reel off, put the next reel on, and thread up before I could get the movie started. I think I had it down to about 2.5 minutes of dark screen between reels to make it as unobtrusive as I physically could.
It was incredible. And that's the true test right there, is you're literally stopwatched. It's like, okay, people are having to sit in the darkness while I furiously work to thread up, get everything good to go, and strike up that bulb, you know? It's those type of experiences that are so exciting, you know, like as terrible as it is as somebody watching the movie, or unfortunate as it is, that is the type of stuff at the Mahoning that I thrive on. And I think a lot of people thrive on, where it's like, we just made a memory, baby.
As much as I strive for giving the best possible presentation, when you're really under the gun like that, where you have to be on your toes to get things going quick, it's an adrenaline rush. I love those prints that are perfect, and I can thread them up, run them, thread the next reel up, and let it go and bullshit and know nothing's going to go wrong. But when you have to be ready for anything, it's exciting.
And that's when the magic happens. There's many a time when we've been back against the wall, no other option, and show must go on, like you said. And to have that mantra as a team is incredibly rare, where everybody is willing to do anything and everything to make this show go off and give the experience to the people that made a point to come out. And I think that's where our legend comes from, you know? From the first person you see coming through the gate to the very bottom, you know, it is passion on display.
Yeah, absolutely.
I must say also, you added quite a bit to our Patreon shows, which were always shows that I sort of completely designed and put the trailers together and sort of gave whoever was projecting it a list of here's how it's going to go. Your knowledge of the retro film and of our holdings and of your own burgeoning 35 collection has made the Patreon shows even better with the pre-show reels and digging into our now voluminous film collection and finding, interesting, cool things that may or may not, we find out when we play them, work together. And that's been for me a really fun sort of partnership in those shows this year that went from, single features with 4 trailers to 2 trailer reels and triple feature by the time we finished it up, just to try to get through all this new content we have. And we also, I will say, went on this little mini adventure together at the preseason. Jeff had acquired a film collection from a deceased man who had quite a large collection of his own. And then we found out about some customer sent us a message saying, have you seen this Craigslist ad? And out in the middle of nowhere, this guy had projectors and film in his basement. And Mike and I were the two who were like, yeah, we'll go out there early tomorrow morning after being up all night running a show. And you helped evaluate the film, whether it was runnable or not, what the titles were. And we wound up getting a pretty amazing haul from a guy who, at one point decided he was going to have a backyard 35 millimeter set up and then got turned on by pinball machines and never did anything with all the film. Did that spark your own interest in collecting 35 and 16?
That is actually what kind of precipitated to it. Since the deal that we got, it was an all or nothing deal. He wasn't just going to sell 1 or 2 films, or, oh, you can take the film, but not take the equipment. You've got to take everything. So in that haul, there was a 35 millimeter projector. And since our projectors are the Simplex E7, this was a Simplex 35, which is just a newer rebranding of the Simplex XL projector. Jeff said it's nothing we need for the drive-in. We can't use it to cannibalize for parts. So he's like, if you want it, you can have it. I'm like, really? You sure?
Heck yes.
And I'm like, okay. I guess I have a 35 millimeter projector now. And so I'm like, well, this was never in my plan. I just collected 8 millimeter loops, but now I've got a 35 projector in my basement, and that spawned, it's like, well, I guess we're going to have a 35 screening room now. So I guess I need prints. So now I'm more or less surrounded by prints.
Your square footage is shrinking rapidly.
Not for long. I've acquired storage for them, so I will have square footage again in the house.
And that's the bug, dude. You get bit by the bug, the passion, the love, and again, to think that this was born on the Mahoning lot is incredible. And I can say it. Anybody who comes to the Mahoning and knows you can say it. You are an incredible projectionist. You are incredibly focused, and you have that type of mentality about you that allows you to get excited to do new things and try new things. Again, going back to when you got the gig at the beginning of the year, was this something that you felt you could handle going into? Thinking, hey, this is something that's trainable and I can handle the pressure of being the guy. Because for me, that's my personal holdup, is like, there's so much immense pressure of being the guy running the film that I don't know if my anxiety can take it.
No, I love to learn a new skill, even though that skill has limited marketability. I'm like, this is something new for me to learn. Another aspect of film handling. Now, instead of just watching a film, I can get an even deeper understanding of film presentation and getting it onto the screen for an audience and understanding a lot more that way, just as an extension of my love for film and seeing movies presented on film, knowing there's actually somebody there physically putting it there. Now I get to be that guy, and I love it. It's been at times stressful between working a day job and then running right up to Lehighton at night to run the film. But it's been immensely rewarding doing this, and I hope to do a lot more of it.
And what's amazing too is that your reputation as a competent projectionist is growing, because, as you said earlier, you were tapped to be one of the projectionists for the Exhumed 24-hour horror-thon at the historic Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. And that's got to say a lot, considering, honestly, a few months ago, you didn't know how to do this.
Yeah, less than 6 months prior, I had no clue what I was doing. And now I was talking with Bob, and he was very happy with my work. The other two projectionists spoke very highly of me.
You're a rare breed. Like you said, you're learning a skill and have learned a skill that, yeah, it might be few and far between the opportunities, but being in such a small group of people with this rare skill, just like our artists that come in and work and then get work because of what they do with us, that's without a doubt, using this skill to only help or better the presentations in the area. That's incredible.
It's been very rewarding, especially getting to project in 1 year 2 historic theaters, one that's open and running for over 100 years now, if memory serves, and is also the setting for some of the most famous scenes in the Blob, and also at the historic Mahoning Drive-In, two very important places for film and to see film. It's
amazing. Well, why don't we talk movies? And I'll have a multi-part question. So,
okay.
Of the films that either you ran or we ran this year, what was your favorite? And where does your love of movies fall now as far as genre, as far as what gets you up and traveling to go see a screening?
Getting to project Cruising, that was...
Oh, yes.
I love Cruising. It was one of those movies that was on my 35 millimeter must-see bucket list. Simply because since the restoration was done, Friedkin had went back and retooled some things with the movie. So to be able to see his original version of the film, you have to see it on 35. But then when the opportunity, it's like, oh, I can actually project Cruising? Yeah, I want to do that. I want to do that. So that was an absolute dream.
What a fun screening that was.
Harry had opportunity.
Harry had all the colored bandanas.
All the bandanas.
Oh, it was so much fun. The fandom was thick.
I was very much considering putting on my best leather for the show, but it was way too damn hot for that.
Yeah, you'd have been dripping.
Oh.
My sweaty leather-clad projectionist. That's how the Mahoning does it.
I'd say after that, Inglourious Basterds, because that is still to this day one of my all-time favorite films.
Tarantino Fest was so hot this year. Seeing Hateful Eight again up on that big screen. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that was
just glorious.
And that was such a beautiful print. There was some scratches from when it was plattered, but really good looking print.
How about on a personal level? Where does your love lie with films, collecting, all that stuff? What are you looking for when you go to a film hall?
I do look for mostly a lot of adult titles from the 70s.
You are a smut fan.
I am a smut fiend. And I am not ashamed.
You wear it with pride, and that's what I love.
He's a man who appreciates the finer things in life, as I like to say.
That's right.
I think a lot of those films do get mischaracterized. There's a certain quality to a lot of them, because a lot of these people performing in them were real actors. They were working in off Broadway, summer stock for Shakespeare stuff. They were looking for work, and it's like, hey, this pays pretty good money. And so you have legitimate actors, interesting stories sometimes. It's not just mindless content to, get a quick one-off and relax to. They were trying to make a real movie, and they did quite well in a lot of instances. That's what I look for myself, what I watch, anything and everything.
Yeah, you're not one of those people that are genre specific. That's why you fit in perfectly at the Mahoning, because we would see you there for bubblegum stuff. We'd see you there for the hardcore, fan events. We'd see you there for the Italian horror. It didn't matter. It was, hey, I am a lover of film.
I love movies. If I go over to my parents' house and my dad has something on just for noise, I'll frequently drop out of the conversation with my parents because I'm watching the movie. It's like, oh, there's a movie. Have I seen this? Ooh, what is this? This is interesting.
It's the connective tissue, like same thing in my house and my family gatherings. It's, the television was on. Yeah, it was as much a family member as Uncle Brian. I don't actually have an Uncle Brian, but but you know what I mean? Like, that's what it was like, is the love for movies and the love for what we do at the Mahoning. It carries over in your life. And, I think you bring an extra spice, no pun intended, to our well-rounded, eclectic taste. You've opened certainly my eyes to a lot of titles, and even just the way you speak on your love of titles that not everybody knows. That's what loving film's about. It's about knowing what you love and filling that void and finding that thing that turns you on. Again, no pun intended.
Oh, you're just making all the puns.
There was one thing I wanted to mention, that you're also a lover of library music. And I don't mean music that's played in public libraries. I mean music sound libraries. What's another word for those? The kind of stock music that companies
Stock
like
music.
Valentino or KPM or companies like that would create, basically ready to go score that would be used in film and TV. And you're a lover of that. And at some point you actually did go through and identify, you and Kate went through and did some amazing audio archaeological work and found all of the original cues that you are currently hearing underneath our voices in this podcast. We refer to it as the puppies and the kitties intermission reel. People who come to the drive-in, they know that. You guys found like every piece of music and what album it came from so that you can listen to the entire piece of original music. And that's just, how did you do that? That blows my mind.
Ever since I first took notice of that intermission reel, I loved the music. I'm like, this is some really cool, like 70s disco library tracks. And any of the resources that I usually use to try to get a key to where it might come from were failing me. What is it?
Shazam.
Shazam, thank you. Coming up empty. And then one day I was just listening through anything and everything from the era of that. That intermission reel was made by Pike Productions. Just anything from that era, US, UK. And I finally somebody uploaded it to YouTube. And YouTube does go through and scan and will identify stuff for rights. And that was my first clue. It was a track off of a library album released on Program Music in the UK. And then through a lot of listening through Program's catalog, we were able to find all but one track continues to elude us. There's one that sounds very similar on the LP, but it is not the one. So I'm wondering if it's a alternate take that they have, but wasn't on the library for demonstration.
It's amazing. And I am excited at the ability to listen to, because a lot of times they would just use pieces of those songs. So they would cut them together, and to hear what the full original piece of music is, for most people, that's probably just screams of insanity. But for me, it's just like,
Oh, yeah.
peeling back the layers. It's like, wow, this is what was originally recorded. And then we just know this. It's like getting a little bit more, like your favorite movie or your favorite song, an extended version, a director's cut, if you will, of that audio. So I'd like to publicly thank you both for that.
Yeah, that intermission clock runs only 10 minutes with, I think, 6 or 7 different cuts played throughout it. And each of those is at least 2 or 3 minutes long on the LP. So you can hear the full idea of what the composer wanted. Another of my favorite things with library tracks, and you'll get this a lot on KPMs, is in one session, they may record 3 different versions, and they'll all end up on the library LP. So it's one that was used in a Jess Franco film. The title of the version used is Escape to Danger, Slower.
Yeah. Not the original, but when they decided to run it just a little slower.
Yeah, they played it one way, and then they played it again just a little bit slower. And sometimes there'd be extra, like, it's the same theme, but with more brass or more percussion to it, you know, just to better suit whatever the music producer of this particular movie or TV show would want for the scene that they're putting it to.
I've discovered a couple different versions of funky fanfare, which is, everybody knows it. It's the
it's the Tarantino, or it's the it's what plays-
Astrogator.
Astrogator feature presentation. Grindhouse
feature
Releasing has a version of it.
Yeah.
And I have found through some of those old KPM records variations on that. And some of them are really cool and equally as funky. And you can still hear the thread of the theme running through it, but it's not the recording that everybody knows. And I'll sometimes throw that in my DJ sets at the theater. And it's just, it's very interesting. I mean, some of it, frankly, to me, some of these recordings are boring because they're intended as, you know, pastoral background tunes. But in most, I don't know how many albums they put out, but there's an astounding number of them available on Spotify for your dance pleasure. And I listen to them all the time in the car. And it's just, it's amazing that stuff is so readily available when originally it was never available to the public. That was the realm of, as you say, film and TV producers and radio stations were the only people who ever heard those, unless they sort of leaked out into the used record stream and people picked them up there.
And that's essentially how it all started getting out, as they went to more compact means of storing their media. And as, well, taste changed and evolved, because some of this was recorded in the 70s with a mindset for 70s movies and TV. Now you're getting into the 80s, 90s. Well, music styles and tastes have changed, so they saw no value in it. They were just throwing it out. And honestly, thanks to like beat makers and mix artists in the 90s, they started discovering this music in the dollar bins and dumpsters behind radio stations and grabbing it up. And it's like, oh, this gives me a really good idea for a beat. Let's sample this into this beat we're doing. And it would still be cheap to license. That was the point of it. When you paid for just a simple license instead of paying somebody to record new music for you.
And what's funny now too is you see movies that may never have originally had proper soundtrack albums. The original library companies are now releasing them. Like I saw again on Spotify, a soundtrack to Monty Python and the Holy Grail that's just all the orchestral music because it came from the DeWolf library. And put out a soundtrack for Dawn of the Dead that was all the non-Goblin background score to it. It's interesting to see that stuff get recognized now. And sometimes a film will get a decades later soundtrack album because somebody realizes we've got all these tracks in our library and we own them. So it's like the record company is licensing the film title as opposed to the film company licensing the music.
People are seeing that there's such a huge interest in this music, and they'll just go and they'll like, let's get the license to do a soundtrack and get it into people's hands, because there's still tons of this library music that's unavailable unless you buy the original LP.
I think in the 90s, again, the 90s was that great period of rediscovery for that, because I remember there were there's a company called Cripple Dick Hot Wax, and they put out the Jess Franco soundtrack cues, some of those, the Gert Wilden. I mean, I guess those were composers composed for films, but also like the Beat at Cinecittà. That was like a series of 2 or 3 CDs that came out that were all library and score tracks from like Italian movies from the 60s, like that.
Yeah, those were all Italian library cues. The Jess Franco release they did, those weren't composed for the movies. They were 2 one-off krautrock albums that were done by 2 different groups.
And those are great. I don't know how, and we're totally not even talking about your life story anymore, but I don't know how expensive those CDs are.
This is part of it.
This is stuff that I picked up like in the 90s when they were, whatever a CD cost. And then I realized you do the math on how long ago that was. And a lot of that stuff has not seen a proper physical reissue since then and is probably almost equally as desirable as the original records at this point.
Yeah, some of those on Cripple Dick Hot Wax, I'm looking for my collection because it's the only way some of this music is available today.
There is nothing more like drive-in fan than rolling around listening to an extended cut of funky fanfare.
Every time I find another one, I get excited.
I agree that
one night for one of your DJ sets, you should do with all the different versions you found, just like you did for Kung Fu Fighting at Enter the Dragon.
Yes.
The all funky fanfare and remixes probably could be done. You could probably get a good hour out of that, I think.
Well, we could chat all night, Mike. I think this was a great insight into who you are, where your passions lie, what you bring to the table here at the Mahoning. And I think it's clear to anybody who doesn't know you personally that you are all passion, you are all heart, and that's really what it takes to be a member at the Mahoning. We thank you so much. Anything else you want to include before we get out of here?
Nothing else that I can think to say other than drive safe, and we'll see you again soon.
My man, I love it. Well, on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.
I wasn't sure.
You were here, Jeff.
I didn't know that was you or not.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it was me.
Was it? If there's
That
any,
was
we
me.
can keep recording. If there's any questions or anything you want to throw in.
Crap. Yeah.
No, I was listening to almost the whole damn thing. I thought it was great. I thought it was great.
That's amazing.
I thought I'm just going to shut up and listen.
Well, since we got you, what's been your experience, Jeff, working with Mike?
Michael is very knowledgeable because I heard the part where he said that he has gone further and has read articles online and talked to other projectionists and other people. And I love the experience that he is gaining by that because I can see it. I can tell it when I talk to him. And I'm wondering, where is he getting this from besides me? I'm like, I know he's talking to other people, but I'm just so amazed that he has come along so quickly. That he, like we said, when you guys were talking about the Colonial Theater, he's able to go down there now and project on their equipment, which is much different than ours. And he's only been doing this like 6 months or so. So I think it's amazing. This is going to make a great podcast because it was really enjoyable. Me just sitting here listening, being quiet. Mike really knows his stuff, and I think it's great.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I look forward to hearing this all edited together.
I'm going to leave it all like this.
Well, thank you, Mike, for
The good, the bad, and the filthy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all the smut.
You're welcome. That's all I've got.
I'm telling you, the fan mail is going to come in. Like, I relate to Mike.
Yeah.
Mike's my new favorite.
Oh, boy.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Hey, I guess if I don't talk to you guys, happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Guys.
To you all as
Yeah.
well.
And I guess we should say, since we're recording, happy Thanksgiving to all you guys out there.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Everybody listening. Yep.
For this year and next year, whenever you happen to listen to this and whenever I happen to get it edited.
Oh, that's right.
They're not hearing this. They're not hearing this anywhere near Thanksgiving.
Time.
Well, that's true, but we can still say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. So
That's
In,
right.
in perpetuity.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.